Welcome back, everybody. This is Mosaic Kopis, Chapter 5, The Long-Awaited. Now, here's a picture of a kopis that I found online. I believe it was on Pinterest. Really liked that one. It's a very old historical example. So I traced this one in Inkscape, including the original horsehead design pommel. That's a pretty typical look for them. The customer it's going to is in Australia, however, and they don't like a grip wrapping around that much there, so I modernized it, pulled it back, and hopefully they'll like it better at customs now. That's always something to consider. So designing over here in Inkscape, I'm designing more of the grip. That's leather, like cord-wrapped leather grip with some blued steel fittings and a blued steel horsehead pommel. Here's a pair of fullers on each side of the blade. I did some sizing of the blade overall. The blade in this drawing is like 23 inches. And then I did some sizing with measured lines here, dragging it to fit the lines. It's 2 3/4 tall and then a 4.5 inch grip length in this drawing so far. Very easy to scale things that way. So getting out of here. Here's an idea. This is a horse head that I found that I like the sculptural quality of. Simple yet effective. I might try to do something like that with files on the horse head pommel, then polish it and hot blue it. So those are the ideas I have going into the grip, and from there we're just going to forge it.
What we have here is our sword billet. It's all welded up, it's annealed, it has been bandsawed. The tip of the top of the tiles here has been bandsawed off. That used to be the rectangular point. The edge bar is along here, and therefore now we'll be able to hot bend that up to create the belly of the point while keeping our edge bar thickness how we want it to be rather than drawing it out long and smeared out. And the focal point of the belly will be somewhere around here. Around here we'll get into the recurve section. We'll draw the tip out a little farther. The recurve section will be like along here, and then I'm gonna leave a wide area here for basically the guard width, and then about this much of the heel of the billet will be drawn out into tang stock. So we're going into the forge now.
So coming over to the anvil here, I've got my 6.5 pound Ilya Alexeyev doghead hammer, or Japanese colors hammer. This thing is awesome. I break it out when I really need to bend heavy stock. I break it out a lot of times, but this is a good use for it, because this billet is like 2.5 inches wide right now and over 1/2 inch thick, so it takes some force to really get it to bend efficiently. So I'm just kind of looking at it from the side, correcting it a little bit, flatten it, decide where to bend it a little bit more just to get some pre-bend. I'm making sure that the edge is on the side that I think it is, and just bending it to how I want the actual profile of the blade to be shaped out in the percussive center out to the tip. And using a top tool now to start forging in where I want the heel of the blade to be. Correcting it on the flat, of course. I start with a thinner top tool, just so I can trap everything linear between the dies when the tool bottoms out and keep the spine straight. Now we're switching to a 1 inch thick top tool to knock that heel farther in. We're going to drive it all the way in, and then we're going to be able to straighten again too, and keep the spine straight on the one side and have the heel only be a shoulder on the one side. Converting some of the added bulk in the tang area now into added tang length and taking the thickness back out of it. Widening the tip a little bit, forging in just a little bit of taper down there, starting that process. And just adding a little bit of length overall to the whole billet at this point. And then using the top tool once again to just keep the spine straight as necessary. Better to nip that in the bud and keep it from getting way out. Here I'm using a top tool that's, it's like a top hammer that's a wide, gentle fuller. And I'm driving it down and I'm kind of like modulating it into forming an inner curve without any lumps and bumps in it. I want it to be the deepest and most curved in the middle, and then just kind of feather out toward the original width of the blade at its ends. So I'm at once keeping the spine straight by keeping the spine supported on that big long flat die while I'm driving this feature in here. And I'm trying to do it a little bit at a time and just keep that top tool moving so I don't make dents or uneven thin spots in my edge bar. I always got to be thinking about what's that edge bar going to look like. After this is all ground out and etched, am I going to have unwanted artifacts from forging it to shape? That's why I cut and bent the tip. But here, I think it'll be pleasing enough to see it narrow somewhat, but evenly, and then change direction right there, where the blade swells out again in the middle at the end of the recurve. So now I'm switching up to a different top tool. This is also a mellow fullering tool, but its axis is along the dies, so now I'm using it to widen the blade. You can see I move it around a lot and I don't hit it too hard because I'm not wanting to create, again, any artifacts of this forging in any particular place in the pattern of the mosaic or in the pattern of the edge bar. I just want to gradually widen everything out without any sharp demarcations. Except for I might want a sharp demarcation right there where the belly stops and the recurve begins. After doing that on both sides and then a little bit of straightening and flattening between the flat dies on the hammer, we're going to move on. Now we're using the 4-pound combo rounding hammer to get in there, finish that inside shape a little bit, take out any high spots, and then just finish smoothing the profile all out through that section. And what I like to do is kind of walk that rounding hammer up toward the end of that curve and then get a sharp terminus to it there. Switch to the flat side of the rounding hammer and then get a sharp terminus from the belly side of it as well, so I get a bit of a corner there. As much as possible forged in, so it looks nice and sharp and intentional, and doesn't require very much grinding when actually grinding the profile in on the belt grinder. And now I'm just looking at it, evaluating little things about the profile, tuning them up, bending the tip out a little bit more, flattening as I go, looking at it a lot from the side, identifying a specific trouble spot or a focal point that I want to change, addressing that, checking it again. There's just a lot of that in this forging because you really want to forge it to where it looks good and not have to grind much profile at all. Sometimes I really like to go to the dished out wood stump to adjust curves without really forging much of a change into the edge. This is just for profile adjustment. You can use it with steel or wood hammers. It might burn a little bit, but don't be afraid. Alright, after that musical diversion, let's check out this neat Hardy tool I made from a cut-off scrap of 4140 I got from Will Stelter. It's just perfect for isolating the recurve section of a knife like this, and then like being able to bend the spine against it. Because a big hallmark of that particular old example of a Kopis that I'm wanting to copy is that it has forward curve throughout the foible section too, just to get that shape right. Here with the blade at roughly 20 inches, we're going to go ahead and cut the handle off next, the chop saw. Hey, dig that new dust collector I built there on the left. That's a Cyclone separator in line before the blower. Works great. And now we're going to pick this dude up with tongs and go back and do some forging on the tang and the heel of the blade. Unfortunately, my camera had a corrupted video clip during the part where I used the power hammer to forge out the tang into a taper. But you've seen me do that before probably, so use your imagination there, I suppose. Here's a bit more of an interesting part. Could probably use a little bit of explanation. So I am grabbing this real tight in the post vise, and I'm using a smaller, well, a narrower 4-pound hammer to start upsetting the backside of that heel toward the blade to give me some gathered up material there that then I can paint out into a sharper, wider heel. You could see it slipping down in the vise there a little bit, but I did grab it nice and tight, so it's not doing it immediately. It's allowing me to get some work done. Here we've flipped the hammer around and we're using the cross peen side to pull that heel out wider, giving it a little bit of a taper at the same time. We have some excess thickness in this area from upsetting that heel in the vise, and we can afford to forge a little bit of taper into it if that's what we got to do to give us the heel width that we want, much like a chef knife right here. You can see how that fanned it out a fair amount wider, and then when we go to the rounding hammer, we can blend that transition up right toward that corner, forge right toward that corner from the top, and then bring it out sharp. Come at that corner kind of from both sides, just pushing material out until it is a very sharp, finite heel on this, and that's what we want. Again, using a smaller hammer to finish pushing that little point up. You actually want to go to a smaller hammer for this, so it has less of an effect of like knocking the whole knife against your other grip, and more of a localized effect of mushrooming the material right where the hammer hits it. Less force transmitted through the work and more force effect just at the surface of the work. And that is a theory that applies throughout kind of all areas of blade forging, Damascus making and stuff, is to choose the right size and shape of a hammer for, do you want to work the surface, do you want to work the core of the material. This is the final heat on this material. We're just going to straighten things up, final adjust and flatten, have a good look at it, and call it good here in a sec. So thanks for tuning in for this chapter. I had an absolute blast forging this blade. Hand forging is some of my favorite stuff to do still. And stay tuned for next chapter, in which we will do some blade grinding and maybe have a check etch and things like that.